subscribe, hit that like button, rate and read the pod on Apple Podcasts, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. Welcome to an episode of The Boss Sauce, everyone. Today I have a very special guest. We have my fiance, Justin, who is actually a business systems integrator. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us what it is that you do exactly as a business systems integrator for those that don't know?
Yeah, so I usually work with businesses and figure out what systems they use on a day-to-day basis and work with them to see what kind of choke points or issues that they're having and try and then find solutions to solve those problems.
What exactly do you mean by choke point?
It could be anything from, certain bits of information just isn't getting to the right people in the company, whether that is a lot of the stuff that I do is with retail. So it might be something along the lines of vendors sending in invoices to a company and how do you distribute that inventory, between multiple stores and do it effectively to where, nothing is slowing down that process.
Wow, so it sounds like it's a lot of making different softwares or systems communicate.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of that. Because I guess on what I usually sit down with these companies and I ask them, what software they're using at the moment, what they're trying to do, what information they want to, keep track of, whether that is, KPIs or, there's, I guess step one is to sit down, talk with them and see where, those issues, kind of take place in their chain.
What would you say that businesses need in order to make their company successful in terms of these softwares and systems?
Yeah, so I guess that it really just depends on the business. Because I mean, there's so many different types, and no business is alike. I mean, definitely, if you're talking about like the retail space, a business is definitely going to want some sort of POS system, something that's going to sit up front at the registers, and it's going to allow cashiers to ring customers up. But at the same time that's happening, it needs to keep track of what's leaving the store, how much each transaction is, and then kind of on top of that, you would want a system that is going to help manage your finances. So all of that data has somewhere to go, especially when it comes to tax time at the end of the year, and then as well, inventory management is humongous. If you don't have some sort of system that your whole team can use in that regards, then it makes it really difficult to track what your store's selling, what you should be selling, and what you shouldn't be selling as well.
Why do you think that it's important for businesses to keep track of exactly what it is and quantities of what they're selling?
Mhm. Yeah, it's really easy for companies to kind of just buy whatever they think they should be buying. And if you don't know what's selling, or what you should be focusing your attention, like the types of products that you should be, focusing all of your attention on, then it's very easy to, buy the wrong things. Just in general, I mean, there's a lot of issues that could pop up from that.
I think what's also important too is that it can help save you money, right? In terms of knowing what like the expenses are and how much of inventory you have.
Exactly. And it's one of those things too, especially if you're running a business and you have multiple locations. It's really easy. I guess a problem that pops up quite a bit in the industry is, one location buying too much of a certain product, and it doesn't sell that well at that location. But if you have something like some sort of inventory management system that allows you to see that and get those types of insights, then like, oh, well, it doesn't, this particular product doesn't work well at this location. this location has a lot of them. That product does work really well at these other two locations. So let's distribute those out, so we can make profit then at that point.
Let's say somebody's wanting to start a business or they currently have a business, but they don't have systems in place. What would you recommend?
Again, it really depends on the type of company that it is.
Since you specialize in retail, let's say a retail
Mhm.
business.
Yeah. So, um, I mean, POS, that's going to be a big one. And I guess POS is kind of a broad term. I guess, again, it depends on the company size, but another way you can look at it, um, is a collection of software. So something like an ERP system, stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. And historically, those have been, just really humongous all-in-one systems like Oracle or SAP. NetSuite is another one of those programs. Or, back, 20, 30 years ago, um, a lot of these systems weren't really accessible, money-wise, to smaller businesses. And even some of those systems nowadays, they cost quite a bit to integrate in general, and then as well to train everybody, to get what you want out of that system. So I guess, ERP is kind of like a blanket term, in the industry. You've got two different types. You've got like an all-in-one ERP system, kind of like those companies I just named: NetSuite, Oracle, SAP. And then there's also, a method of kind of finding best in class, or finding the systems that are going to work best for you, and then stacking them together, and then making sure they're communicating well. And that works really well for a lot of businesses these days who don't want to commit, several $1,000s, a month, even for, one of the classical ERP systems. Um, and it allows you to kind of pick and choose, you know, certain software that is going to be most beneficial for your business.
Would you agree that in your position that you almost play like this IT and maybe like a for layman's terms like a baby software developer, baby coder? Would you say that that has anything to do with what you do with integrating these systems and having them communicate to one another so that there's like a smooth workflow and a seamless process?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that I do is I'll sit down with a company and I'll figure out, like I was saying earlier, what issues are you having? What software are you using? And what do you want to achieve? And that's different for every business. Because there's definitely been times in the past where I'm working with a company, they tell me this is what we want to do. Can you develop something for this? And it's yes, I can, but it's one of those things that there might be a solution already out on the market that makes more sense, for that company, as opposed to hiring a developer, hiring somebody or paying me to, write a program. You build a program for them. And because another thing that you have to think about too is if you don't have somebody on staff that is doing like what I do on a day-to-day basis, and you pay somebody to, build you software, you're going to want that company that built you the software to offer some sort of like maintenance program afterwards. It's kind of an ongoing thing. You would continually pay that company, hopefully, if you chose the right company, to, make updates to the system, or if an API, changes over time, making sure what is connected up to your system is updated. Because the last thing you want is, to show up to work, and you're opening your store and none of your systems are working.
So kind of like having a person who does, I guess, I mean, wouldn't that be kind of IT, somebody that can troubleshoot problems in the software, but also can update the systems and make them work when everything's going haywire?
Mhm. And that's kind of why I was, talking about like the best of class systems earlier. as opposed to having like a company develop some software for you. And there might, being something on the market that's already, going to work well for your business, whether that is some sort of inventory system, or some sort of like tool that connects up to, say, Microsoft Excel and allows you to, you know, send information from like an Excel spreadsheet over, into like your POS system or your inventory management system. If you're working with like one of these um, other solutions, then it kind of allows them to take over that maintenance. So a lot of times that is better for smaller businesses who aren't able to have somebody, on payroll who is sitting there and, diagnosing any system issues, or really developing for them on a day-to-day basis. So I guess, that's one of those things that, like I was saying earlier, how it really just depends. And, I got to talk with companies and, see what works best for them. Do you have somebody in-house that is going to be able to monitor this? Same with if the business is expanding, it's kind of a necessity. I mean, you can kind of get away with, one or two stores maybe, and running some fairly simple systems. But once you expand past that, and again, every business is different. Every retail business is different too, because you might only have, you might be like a vape store or something. You might have 400 or 500 products. It's relatively easy to, keep track of your inventory with like an Excel spreadsheet, or even some of the more basic like POS systems. But if you're talking, a company like, that's selling, 100,000 products, that's when it really starts, getting difficult to expand as well too, without a lot of these systems in place.
For the smaller businesses that don't really have hundreds of thousands of products, like what do you recommend that they do if they can't afford a higher ticket person that can take care of all of these softwares and do maintenance? Like, because obviously a lot of these softwares and systems cost thousands of dollars, but not everyone can afford that. Is there a way that they can maybe work their way up there? Like, do you recommend doing something on, I don't know, for example, Excel or Google Sheets, to kind of get started and starting to get into the habit of having a system until they can afford an expensive one?
I mean, I think Excel is essential in every business. I mean, pretty much every business out there, no matter what it is, whether they're like in healthcare or retail or, whatnot, is still going to have, Excel. Like, Excel's not going anywhere. The one downside about Excel is that it's hard. I mean, it could be very easy to send an Excel workbook to somebody that you're tracking, all of your inventory on, or, your KPIs, and somebody make one little mistake and there's no real good way to recover, that workbook, or accidentally, copying the wrong numbers to somewhere. So I wouldn't suggest running very, very important, vital things on Excel. But I think there's a lot of smaller, I guess, POS systems in general out there that will get people in, start moving in the right direction, when it comes to, tracking their financials, or just really, digging in deeper with the inventory. So, I mean, that's the one big problem as well in the industry, is there's literally thousands of these companies. So that's where it kind of makes sense to speak to somebody like me who has, tested out a lot of these different, smaller POS companies, and, kind of put them through the ringer to really see, how well do they work. Because the one thing in this industry as well is everybody is, going to tell you that their system is the absolute best. You look at their website, it's super flashy and it claims to, be able to handle all of these issues. And then you get on the phone with that said company and you talk to their sales team and the same thing. Oh, this will solve your problems. And until you get into the software and start testing it, you really don't know. That's when you start to see, issues that, you know, you wouldn't have saw based off of like the demo that the company gives you when you first start talking to them.
So what you're saying is that you should test it first. And it sounds like these companies allow what you said is a demo. Does that mean that they give you a free trial before you make a decision?
Yeah, so most of these companies, you'll call them up, you'll schedule a meeting, and you'll sit down with somebody on their sales team, and they'll ask you a little bit about your business, and then they hop straight into the software and they start showing you like an actual, demo of like how it operates. A lot of these companies do also give you a free trial. 14 days free trial. And I mean, though that is really good, because I've sat down in these demos with the sales rep and he's showing me everything and, checking all of the boxes. But, it's like, well, let me, sit here and finish out the trial and I'll get back with you. Because again, that's the only way that you can start to see if it's going to work for your business. And a lot of times too, you know, I guess it's important to, like, when you're looking at the software to, kind of, just find out if, for instance, the company has like an API, um, which is a application programming interface. So that is going to allow basically it's going to allow two programs that wouldn't normally talk together to talk together with the help of with coding. You can code the two systems together. So that's the one big thing that I suggest too for businesses that are looking at like a POS system in general. Um, Most of them these days do have an API, but try to find one or ask that company, do you guys have an API, an open API? Because that is going to allow you to expand in the future when it comes to more software.
So you specifically ask for an open
I mean, you
API.
could say API either way, though, but that's just gonna because you don't want to get locked into, a software that can't do everything that you want it to and not also be able to expand. Like you don't want to invest a bunch of time and resources into transitioning your whole company onto a new system if it doesn't allow you to integrate your other systems together.
Right. So besides the API, let's say hypothetically I'm a retail business owner speaking to a consultant for one of these systems. Besides the API, what are some other things that you recommend asking these consultants to make sure that you find the system that's right for you as a retail owner?
Ask them who they integrate with, ask them about their support team as well. The last thing you want is, again, to show up to work and for some reason the system's down and you don't have a phone number that you can call to try to get that up, the system's up and going. You're just losing money at that point. Um, and again, just kind of going back to this is why as well, like the trial is so important to test everything out. You're never going to find a system that is going to check all of the boxes for your company. You want to try to get as many of those boxes checked. That is another good thing too. Prior to even sitting down with these companies, you want to have a list of yourself with what you want to get out of the system. If you could sit down in one of those meetings with those POS companies and you say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. Can you guys do these things? Then you in a lot of these meetings now too. I mean, they're all virtual, they're over Zoom or whatnot. So you can kind of gauge right off the bat, if somebody is, they're like, oh yeah, or we'll find out about that. And it's just like, how do you not, that was a pretty simple, question that I just asked, and you're not, you sell the software, but you don't know, this answer to, so I'd say that is probably the most important thing when you go to sit down with these companies. And then work with several people like on your team, you kind of want to have a team for something like this, like in your company itself. So, having 3 or 4 people who you can talk to and discuss and figure out you know, um, what do we need this system to do?
What would you say besides these consultants not knowing like the answers to if to some of your questions, like what are some other red flags would you say you need to look out for?
Um, some other red flags would be, I mean, it's tough too because they're salesmen. They do get kind of annoying a lot of times. Um, and they will excessively call you. Okay, so here's one. When they're trying to get you to consistently, like, okay, let's next step. Here we go. Let's sign the contract. You should be allowed to take as much time as you want to make a decision. They're very, very pushy, most of these companies. Um, so it's one of those things that you don't feel like you have to say yes to anything, even after the first demo or whatnot. The ball's always in your court. They want your money. So, just don't fall into it because the last thing you want, especially some of these bigger companies like Oracle or NetSuite, those are good companies. But the last thing you want is to, sign a contract with them and then you or your team didn't invest or have enough time to invest to really, test out the system and see if it'll work for you. And then all of a sudden you're integrating it. 6 months later, you're live and it's not working for you. And then you just wasted, a lot of money, a lot of time. And now you're, back to the drawing boards. We got to figure out what, system we need to switch to again.
Yeah, it sounds like to really make this work for you and your company, you have to do some level of like research and your own due diligence to make sure that you're finding a company that's going to meet all of your business's needs. It also sounds like you have to go in there asking questions and knowing exactly what it is that you're looking for.
Exactly.
Um, how do you feel currently with the state of AI and integrating these systems together and overall using AI in general in, for example, a retail business?
So I mean, it's here to stay. I mean, there's been a lot of different AI companies that have been coming out recently. Like everybody knows about ChatGPT or Google's Bard, and I'm excited about it. It's very exciting. Um, I think that you just have to kind of be careful with they're very helpful tools, but you at this point or at this stage you can't allow everything in your business to you know be completely functioning off of AI. I guess at this point, I mean, the AI systems aren't built for it yet. um but I think as a tool though, it is really, it's very beneficial.
Do you use AI at all in your position?
Not as much as I initially did. Like when ChatGPT first came out, I was like, oh wow, like this is pretty powerful. Sometimes you write like a snippet of code and for some reason it's not working. It's nice to, instead of sitting there and looking for, like a comma or something that you forgot and scanning the whole thing, you can, go to ChatGPT and literally just say, please check this syntax and then copy and paste, your code snippet in there. And it's going to break down like, you know, this is what the code does. This is what's wrong with it, and then it regenerates like a new version. So I think it's a good tool for quickly solving like small problems. But right now, though, it's one of those things that you still really need somebody that is monitoring that as well too. Like I wouldn't go full AI on specific uh trying to think of a good example here. Um,
Like to be completely dependent on
yeah,
AI.
I wouldn't be completely dependent on AI because the same thing too with ChatGPT. Like you could sit there and ask it a question. Um, can you tell me or like ChatGPT is like it's not good with math. Like you can hook it up to other programs that are a lot better at doing like calculations. But it's funny because you can tell ChatGPT like, "Hey, please check the syntax," or analyze this data set, and it will look at it and say, "Oh, everything's right." And then all you have to say is like respond back, "Are you sure?" question mark, and it'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is actually a mistake here." So you really do have to kind of you can use it, but you want to check your work as well afterwards. Like you don't want to, I wouldn't like rely on it to code me like a whole program in the state that it is. I think in a few years from now, or I mean, it's hard to tell too because technology is always. I mean, what a year and a half ago, nobody was even really talking about ChatGPT. So this stuff does, rapidly grow and get better. And now that they are, a front runner in this industry, um, it's great because now all these other companies are like, okay, we got to step it up. So, it's only just going to keep getting better and better, all of these different AI tools. But yeah, I mean, if you are using it to automate processes in your business, you definitely want somebody to kind of, still keep an eye on whatever it's doing because you don't want it to, um, you know, miss certain details. So I guess it really just depends. But there are some really cool use cases, just in general for AI. Like, I mean, you can make, for instance, like a chat bot that, like, for your business, you could hook that up to like Instagram or Facebook. And I mean, this kind of been around for a little while, and it will, when you message one of these companies and you kind of get that automated bot, it's like, oh, thank you for contacting so and so, our business hours are blah, blah, blah. And you can train like one of these AI bots based off of, the information that, whoever's contacting you. So if somebody's like, oh, hey, do you guys have, this brand, or, this type of, let's say like music gear or something. Do you guys have guitars? You could train the bot to, okay, this customer asked a question about guitars. Let's send this question to the guitar department. So that way nobody's even really having to have full overwatch of the inbox, but the AI, as long as you train it on the right questions, something like that's going to save your company a bunch of time. Or hey, what about drums? And then AI sends that question, emails it to your drum team and gets it to the people who is going to be able to answer those questions, best. So there's a lot of great use cases, and more just keep coming out every day.
Do you see AI taking your job in the near future?
No, not anytime soon. um, I think because kind of again with like the oversight, I think it's going to keep getting better and it's going to keep wowing everybody. But I feel like at least for the very foreseeable future, companies are still going to need to. I think AI will continue to, um, you know, um, AI is going, like I said earlier, it's here to stay. What is really going to set somebody that has like a job like me ahead is, figuring out the best way to use AI, because I feel like companies are always, the CEO of a company isn't going to want to sit there and program something with ChatGPT and then also rely on it run, like it's just not at that state. There's always going to, I feel like there's always going to be the need for somebody to be sitting in that chair and monitoring all of these AI workflows that are happening, any sort of automations, and then also being there when one of these automations break, because there's still computers and there's still bugs that happen. And, again, a CEO is not going to a lot of times know what to do if all of a sudden the automation chains go down. And so I feel like for quite, I don't know, several years at least. Hopefully not. I think the big thing is we have to integrate with the AI as opposed to the other way around.
Yes, I feel like AI reminds me of social media. I think that it's they're both tools that business owners should start integrating and using just because, like you said, it is here to stay. Would you recommend that every business owner, whether big or small, that they at least start playing with AI and integrating maybe even a small, something small, like for example, ChatGPT into their business so that way they get used to it and then eventually can make that big adjustment as AI gets more intelligent?
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, definitely. I mean, to try it out. I mean, ChatGPT has like a free version, like you sign up, but you don't have to pay for it. Um, and you don't really know until you start playing around with it, and then it's one of those things where you're like, oh wow, like I didn't know that this just made this process so much easier for me on my day-to-day basis. Um, so I don't think it hurts to. I think it's important for businesses to kind of keep track of these things and find out, ways to incorporate some of this stuff. And a lot of these big companies, just in general nowadays, whether that's like Microsoft or, I mean, think of like Facebook or Meta and, all of the social media companies nowadays, they're integrating bits of AI or allowing people to do different things on their platforms that are AI driven. So I do think it is a good idea to kind of, for a business to mess around with those things. You don't have to go, all in on it, but just kind of, test it out, see what it does. And then also just watch, YouTube. I mean, it's easy enough to search like, top AI tools for my business. I haven't done that in a while, so I couldn't like, but it, even if these tools don't necessarily work for you right now, it kind of puts them in your mind, or it kind of shows you possibilities of some of these tools. And then, maybe 6 months from now, you're still running into like the same issue that you've been having. And then you go back to YouTube, you go to Google, and now you're more familiar with like the terminology as well, too, and it kind of makes it easier once you know the terminology of a lot of this stuff to find tools that are right for you.
Are you having trouble with social media? Need a content creator, a video editor, or need social media management? Well, those are some of the services that I offer. Go to reneeswaria.com for more. Now back to the show. So let's backtrack a little. How exactly did you get into becoming a business systems integrator? Well, I know that you didn't go to school, but how exactly did all of this happen?
Um, I mean, I've always been into computers, like ever since I was a kid. I mean, I was probably 12 years old and like trying to rap and, make music and stuff. I know it's pretty crazy. Um, and then that ended pretty quickly, because I'm not a rapper. Um, and then moved into, uh, computer graphics. I mean, that was a huge portion of my life, whether that's Photoshop or using programs like GIMP for 3D animation, um, Adobe Premiere, After Effects. Like I spent a good portion of my life. I mean, even I mean, I probably started messing around with like Adobe After Effects when I was like 14 or 15, got real into it. And um, I mean, even to this day, like sometimes I'll, make an animation for something. I don't know. So I guess I've always just kind of been on a computer for my jobs. And then when it came to nowadays, like working with computers, um, I guess it kind of just is, for me at least, was kind of like a natural progression. I've always used these programs. I've always wondered how they work. Um, but I never really had the time to invest in learning how they work or, um, but I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years, especially with the stuff that I've been doing, I mean, it becomes crucial to, figuring out how stuff works together. Like when you run into a problem with your business and you can't find the right software to use to solve that problem, you know, at some point, at least for me, it was like, well, how do I make it then? How if I can't, find a company that is going to do what I need it to do, like what's the easiest way for me to achieve what I want and how hard is it to make it?
How do you handle tough situations like when for example, there's a glitch in the code and you can't exactly find a way to make what it is that your client's requesting for their business. For example, if they're requesting some dashboard with all their employees' names, but you just can't get that done. How do you approach those situations with creating a project or like a software for that particular thing, but it just doesn't work? Because I'm sure that happens.
Yeah, it definitely happens, and it could be super frustrating. Um, I guess I guess it depends on like the platform that you're doing it on or what the specific thing is, but stuff does break, and it can be sometimes, I mean, you don't want to ever have to have this happen, but sometimes the easiest way is to kind of, usually you have multiple versions of something. If I'm making like a program, or if I'm programming like a dashboard in like Power BI, which is like a data analysis program, it's, gives companies ability to see into their insights, like how their business is running. Sometimes stuff breaks, and or you're building a new dashboard and it's just not working. I'd say it's important, or at least what I do is, if I'm starting to experiment, or like, oh, I want to make um, I guess this happens a lot when I'm trying to improve systems as well too, or improve a workflow or an automation. You know, I will start working on it, and then after 2 hours, it's not working anymore. It's not doing what I need it to do. I think it's vital. I always save multiple versions of that program that I'm working on. So, I have like this data set. Nowadays, especially after all these years of like making music and making, animations, you kind of learn to, save multiple versions of the file. So you always have something to come back to if all else fails. Go back to when you first started. I guess you kind of just have to get used to, spending several hours on something, having it not work, and then being able to let go of it and start over again. But I feel like that is huge, to always just have, you never work on the production environment, which is the program or the data set that the business is operating on, because you don't want to be working on that, mess up something, and then the business isn't able to use it. But if you have a separate production environment, or like a copy of that environment, so then you can make all these tweaks and changes to that one. The business is still running on the main environment. Once you get this one working really well, then you can, and it's tested and everything's working as it should, then you can, put this one in line. You could switch the environments then at that point. So version history, or is huge. Versioning.
It sounds like a very high pressure role. How do you handle knowing that businesses are relying on you and your softwares that you develop and create for them?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of pressure. But I think, if you do a lot of, over time, you start to kind of, have these built-in fail safes, kind of like what I was saying,
Say what?
like a fail safe, like something that, that you put into place to where that it's not going to mess up something. So like what I was just saying, like that's a big one. Just never, making changes to something that the business is, you know, reliant on, you know. So over time, once I started doing that more, then it does kind of remove a lot of the pressure, because then it's like what I'm working on right now might not be working, but it doesn't matter, because the business is working on the stable, it's running on the stable version of this. So, um, but yeah.
Do you ever get creative blocks? Because it sounds like a lot of this is like software like creation or development. How do you face blocks or obstacles where you just can't seem to get a program or whatever it is that you're working on to do what it is that you want it to do?
That's a good question. You definitely get a lot of creative blocks, but it's one of those things that I like to have a running list of projects that I'm working on. So if I get stuck on something or I'm spending way too much time on this specific task and it's just not going anywhere, I mean, breaks are essential. Um, Stepping away from that project for, maybe even that day or just a couple hours. And that's why I like to have lists of all these different projects that I'm working on, because then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go, hop over and work on this for a couple hours and not think about this thing that's, that I can't figure out right now. And then I'll come back to that later. And what you find a lot of times when you're working on something else is, while you're working on that, you find ways, subconsciously you're like, oh, I'm building this right now. That would actually work well for that. Or you think of like, oh, why was I spending so much time, focused on this aspect of the thing that was causing me like the creative block. Um, it also allows you to detach from the amount of time that you've spent on something. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where this used to happen a lot with like when I'm like was making music or movies and stuff. You spend so many days or hours on a project and you get really, you're like, I want to make this work. This has to work. I've spent so much time on it. And you just try to force things that shouldn't, when in reality, you should have, just started over, but it's hard to let go of something that you've put so much time into. So I feel like having multiple things to do that aren't necessarily related to each other. So multiple different projects, skipping back and forth between them allows you to kind of, you know, lose the attachment to one thing that you've spent so much time on. And again, a lot of times you figure out a new way to, get out of that block.
What would you say is a common misconception about being a business systems integrator?
Mm, uh,
That it's easy?
I, no, I don't think anybody thinks it's easy. But I mean, this is a tough question, I guess. Uh,
Or I guess what would you say is is the hardest part about your job and creating all these systems and creating the right thing for businesses?
okay, yeah. So honestly, I'd say the hardest part is getting the company or the employees more so to adopt the software or this new style of workflow. It's called change management. So it's one of those things that it's really easy for like the executives of the company to be like, oh, everybody needs to use this software. It's brand new, and but people don't like change. And I feel like one of the hardest parts a lot of times is getting everybody on board to where no, we need to use this system or we need to, process things a certain way. I know it's different than how it was done before. I know the old way was easier. So I guess, I mean, training is the number one thing when it comes to something like that. And honestly, that is, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I want to say like 90% of like full blown ERP system integrations fail due to change management. Um, yeah, so that is probably the hardest to get people to, because the company owners, they're the ones that paid for it. They're fine. Let's do it. This works. Like, let's go. But to get the average worker, they have a lot of questions a lot of times. Why are we doing it this way? Or I like the old system better. Or so it's important to explain that to them, but then also um I guess incorporate them on like for instance, if you go into a company and you ask the workers like, hey, what would you like, you know, how how can we make something better for you? Or like what's a common annoyance for you in like your day-to-day work? The more people that you like workers that you get their opinions on these things, the more they feel like that that they were considered in this change. Um, and then they're more willing to adopt like what is set into place because they're like, oh, that was my idea. He said, he told me, or I told him that this wasn't working. And, the new system that he built, incorporates that. So like, yeah, let's use this. I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, it sounds like when going into these meetings with these consultants for these systems, it sounds like it would be a good idea to consult with the employees and find out exactly what it is that
Mhm.
they need to so that they feel heard. And I think that would just make it a lot easier for employees to embrace the new system too.
100%. Yeah. Cause you're factoring in, I mean, they're the ones that are working with it. And, and again, I mean, if, they know that their opinions were, like their concerns were heard, then they're going to be a lot more willing to use something. And you're going to get them, a better system that's going to, allow them to perform their job better.
For business owners that are getting a new system or do currently have a new system, is there anything that you would recommend in terms of how to address pushback from a new system?
Training. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing. Not when you're training somebody, the big thing too is, they might get frustrated when they're, using like whatever new software it is or this new workflow. And me personally, like if I'm training somebody, like one of the things that I do, because it's true, a lot of times, if you relate to them while you're teaching them, say they mess something up or and they're like, oh, um I accidentally copied this part, I meant to paste it over here, but and I'm working with them, I'm like, oh, I've had that happen to me too, like don't worry about it, like it's okay. I feel like when you do that, it allows people to be like, oh, this is, it's not just me that's messing this up, or made this mistake, like that guy, the guy who like put it together or whatever, he's done the same thing, he knows how I feel, so I feel like if just getting on the ground with everybody and answering their questions, walking them through it, building tutorial videos if you can, because I might not always be accessible as well, or I might not be able to, be on the ground and, giving full blown training because I'm developing something else or whatever it is. Just giving them all the resources possible to where there isn't that pushback. I mean, especially with a lot of the companies that I work with, I'll get phone calls throughout the day of, different random employees who, how do I do this? Or, this, you're not always going to get that, it's kind of like a service that I offer that, you know, a lot of other companies aren't going to allow you unless they have like a whole tech support team or whatnot. Um, but I feel like that allows people to have their concerns addressed right away. And, it just I don't know, overall it helps out quite a bit.
When a business is switching over to a new system, like for example, a POS system, how how much time do you think it would take in order for them to be fully crossed over for all of their information to fully be implemented into the new system? Would you say it would range anywhere from like a month to 3 months, maybe, depending on the size?
Yeah, I mean the biggest factor of that is, um for instance, how many products do they have that they have to transfer over? um how many employees do they have as well? How much of their old data from like their old systems do they need to import into the new system? How clean is their data as well? And meaning like, I mean, quite often I'll work with, different companies and they send me over their data to, input into like the new system to, get all their products in there, and stuff isn't labeled correctly, or certain products share like the same characteristics and you don't really, or they're too generalized or too broad, like you don't know like if this product is actually that specific product. The cleaner the data, the easier like the implementation, every time. But 99% of the time, companies have just horribly kept data, so it really, really just depends on a lot of different factors. But I'd say anywhere from, I mean, if it's a company that has, say 200 products and I mean, that would only take, you know, I mean, not that long. I mean, I could probably clean up 200 products of data in 15, 20 minutes. And then, depending on the system that they're transitioning over to, you know, um, it wouldn't take long to implement. But then you got these companies that have, four, 500, 1,000 people that work there. They all need logins into the system. They've got multiple locations, thousands and thousands of products, depending on the system that they're going over to as well. I mean, it could take anywhere from, you know, 6 months. It depends on how many people are also working on, like, if I have somebody helping me out or if I have a team of people helping me out, that will also speed up the process. Um, but I mean, if you look at big companies like Nike, even like the Navy, like the military, they have to use these systems as well too. They might not be using, well, Nike's using POS systems, the military is not using POS systems, but they are using ERPs. So um, sometimes those companies or government institutions, it could take several years to transfer all of their information from the old system and get it into the new system. You just don't want to take your old information and not have it as clean as you could possibly get it before getting it into the new system, because you're just going to run into a lot of the same problems you do with the old system with the new system with your unclean data.
Can you define clean data for people that don't know
Mhm.
what you mean?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on, like, for instance, in retail, a lot of times it is your products. So you might have a like a car repair store or something like an AutoZone or whatnot, and you have, say, all these different windshield wipers. And if several of them like don't have like the associated brand with them, or one of them might be missing like the barcode, or some of these products don't have like their vendor's cost associated with it, or the product is named just windshield wiper, and you're like, what company, who made this windshield wiper? That would be an example of unclean data. And you see it a lot from companies of various sizes. I've seen companies that have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of products, and an invoice will come over or whatnot, and it's missing, the barcode, it's missing like the brand. It's tough to get insights on your business, like, well, what brands are working the best? What should we sell? What should we get rid of? If you don't know specifically, that the products, like, they don't have the right information associated with them. Like, if somebody buys something at the POS register and the report shows windshield wiper, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, they bought a windshield wiper for 22.99, but that's the only information I have. Like, you're not going to know, should we buy that? What windshield wiper was that they bought? Like, so we could buy more of them because they're selling well. So it's important to really have all of that stuff organized, and that's it's huge.
Yeah, it sounds like the more detailed and specific your data is, the more successful your business will be when implementing a new system
Mhm.
or going from an old system to a new one, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say that it's impossible to expand if you don't have certain programs and systems in place?
Again, for that, it depends, because I feel like, and it also depends on how big you want to go, how big you want to expand. Because I feel like restaurants can, have quite a few different locations using like a basic POS system, something like Toast, or um, I don't do too much with restaurants, but as long as you're able to keep track of your ingredients, when do these expire? Um, you can get away with, having quite a few locations. But once you start, like on the retail side of things, if you only have a few hundred products, you can expand a decent amount, because again, that's pretty easy to track. Um, but if you want to like if you're a bigger business and you want to expand, I mean, you definitely need to really invest or have somebody to, focus in on, one of these different softwares that are out there that are going to allow you to kind of, collect all of this data, all of this information into one easily digestible system. So, your high level like CEOs or whoever's in charge of operate like the operations team has those insights to where they can manage how stuff is being purchased, or stock transfers, or where should employees be this day on this location. It's really slow on Tuesdays. For some reason we've got overstaffed at this location. I could see it right here already, 3 days before this problem even happens. Let's move two people from this location to this location. So the bigger the company gets, the more vital it is to have these systems in place, to where you kind of get out in front of the problem before it even happens.
I can see that. I think the short answer would be yes, just
Mhm.
because you would need to have like the correct data and easy to access data, it seems like, in order to create something successful and long term.
Exactly. Mhm.
For those starting out, for people that want to become, for example, a business systems integrator, do you have any advice, or is there anything that um, you would say to Justin, who was just starting out? Like, would you have any words of advice?
Um, I mean, definitely learn as much as you can about as many different systems as you can. So whether it's like, you know, NetSuite or SAP or Sin7, or it's really good idea to kind of get an idea on how all of these systems work. You don't have to go full in depth and learn everything about them, but it's a good idea to, because they don't all do the same thing. So you wouldn't want to suggest to a company that is, real retail based, like, and they need like POS systems and, registers, and, you wouldn't want to, suggest like a manufacturing style system for them. I mean, it could work, but it makes more sense to find them something that's more retail based. So just kind of getting an idea of all of the different systems that are out there. And again, there's a lot of them. Um, that would be one thing, I guess, to look at. Um, and then just try to like learn as much as you can. I mean, just watch a lot. Like you said earlier, I didn't go to college for this. But I do have like a really obsessive personality. So, I watch one YouTube video about like a certain topic, then it's like, oh, they mentioned this term in that video. Like, what does that mean? Like, I need to learn more about that. So I just always be open to new information, especially in the technology industry, because stuff is constantly changing. And you kind of do have to be you keep updates with, what's happening, and always be learning as well too. If it's like a slower day, and you got like your projects done that day faster than you normally would, um, you know, go online and, take a course, learn about like a different programming language that you don't know about, that, it's just good idea to always, keep learning this stuff.
If someone had the opportunity to go to school for this, or if you had the opportunity to go to school for this, would you?
At this point, oh, I guess it just depends, because I don't feel like a lot of people go to school for this specifically. I think it's kind of something that people find themselves into. I think a lot of people that do get into this did go to school for this, or did go to school for like with like computer science, or something along those lines, and then over time, once they got out into like the real world, they may have ended up in a position like this, some sort of like, system consulting type of job, or like, like IT help desk or whatnot. um Personally, right now for me, like, I wouldn't go back to school for it, because it's such a, um the beautiful thing about like everything that's online now, there's so much information and there's so many courses, and you don't have to go to school to like get certified for a lot of stuff. You can just pay a little bit of money, but there's some of the best teachers of like computer science nowadays, like they realize they can make more money, you know, putting out like a class on Python or like a whole workshop, and than they would if they were like teaching this at like a university or something. And they have more freedom. And then also, you know, you have the ability to um, follow along at your own pace as well. I know with like a lot of like the online like schooling that I've done or like these workshop classes, it's you're sitting there and you're coding something at the same time that like the teacher or whoever's doing the class is coding something. And then if you need to take a break, you can pause it and go do that or do whatever. And I feel like that workflow for me at least is it works a lot better for the way that I operate and the stuff that I do now, as opposed to, being forced to like sit in a classroom and, I don't know. I don't like asking questions in front of hundreds of people. I've never been that good at that.
What would you say is your secret boss sauce to setting yourself up for success?
So I guess two things. One of them, I guess, kind of falling into, okay, so a big one is just getting sleep. I don't know if anybody said that on here. That might be pretty basic, but I feel like I've spent a long time, probably the last 15 years of my life, not sleeping good, trying to cram as much stuff, whether that's like a project that I'm working on. I'm up till 4 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, oh, okay, this is done. This is done. And I wake up the next day and it's not done. It's not functioning the way that I want it to, or, I feel like over the past few years, I've been really prioritizing sleep, and it's helped me to learn a lot faster than all of these years combined in the past. So I feel like sleep is very, very important. And then when it comes to like the programming stuff, I feel like one of the things that I do is I always build a way into like the stuff that I'm building, to kind of keep track of analytics of the stuff that I've built and how often people are using them. And a lot of programs also do this, like, Microsoft has different logs and stuff to see how many times like a certain dashboard's been viewed, or, how many times an employee's used this particular program. Because a lot of times, you build something in your head, you're like, oh yeah, people are using it, people are using it. And then you go and you look at those logs and you're like, why hasn't anybody used this for 2 months? And then right away, like, either something's wrong with it or it's not doing what you needed to do. And so then you kind of able to go back to the drawing boards, or then you can go to the source and say, hey, why aren't you guys using this? Not like in like an aggressive way, but just like, is there something wrong with it, or what would make this better? And I feel like that's a good way to, um, always be, making the programs and, your workflows run better as well too. Like, you never build something and then it's just the way, it stays that form for, its entirety of its life cycle. Usually you build something and then a month later you're like updating it and trying to make it better, and updating and trying to make it better. So I'd say that's big. Just find a way to, um, you know, keep track of the stuff that you build with these types of systems or programs or tools, and track their performance and see if people are actually using the stuff that you've built. And if not, why?
Thank you so much for that. I feel like today we got so much information, especially for business owners who are wanting to implement a new system or already have a new system. This has just been super insightful. Can you tell everyone where they can find you if they want to connect or have any more questions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the easiest way is going to be contact me by email. So my email is jteprods@gmail.com. Any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the Boss Sauce. We'll see you next time, everybody.